Just a housekeeping note on questions. If you have a question, you're here in the House, you have these cards on your table. You may write down your questions and pass them up to either end of the head table. We'll sort through them, and we'll try to get to as many as time allows. You like the gavel?
I like the
It's
gavel.
a replica of George Washington's gavel given
thank
to
you.
me in my inaugural. First of all, as you can imagine, we have quite a few through the internet and so forth. We have a bunch of different questions. I have not seen all of these questions in depth, and just for the record, neither has Mr. Read, so he has not been prepped for these things as it should be. So this question actually comes from one of our board members who actually covers healthcare for National Public Radio. What do you think of the negotiations on the healthcare bill on Capitol Hill, and specifically, lawmakers today are debating whether insurance policies should be required to have a minimum level of benefits to qualify for tax subsidies. These include prescription drug coverage, and do you think these so-called essential health benefits should remain in law?
Well, I can't give you any prediction. I'm not a politician. I'm a businessman who's trying to get important cures for patients. What I would say is that, we would support, or we do support, any system that ensures patients get access, that their incentives are in the right place, that there is choice in the system, and that people get the ability to choose the insurance they need for the particular time they are in their life. And we do believe old people should choose to have insurance. As regard having essential benefits, I think it's a situation of, my preference is less regulation and more market-based incentives is the right way to answer that issue. But you do need a safety net. So I believe the law should have an appropriate safety net for people who cannot afford insurance and who have pre-existing conditions.
Just a quick follow-up, because this is sort of breaking. The House Freedom Caucus chair says there's no deal on the House Republican bill to replace the Affordable Care Act. What's the impact on the industry from your vantage point? That President Trump has been saying, I want this bill, I think I can make a deal. And he's told you directly something you criticize about that he doesn't understand your industry.
I don't think
prices.
I don't believe there's any short-term impact for the industry. I think there's a tremendous impact for patients, short-term.
What would that
short-term, I think you see a system of the Affordable Care Act that is collapsing. It's pushed into existence no first-time coverage for pharmaceuticals. It's pushed into existence 6,000 deductible before you get to any reimbursement. For instance, when King versus Birdwell was being discussed, we looked at what would happen if they'd struck down the federal exchanges, and we decided that we would provide our medicines for free to everybody who were on the exchanges. Cost to Pfizer, $40 million a year. I mean, in a $52 billion corporation, that's nothing, because no one's using our medicines in the exchanges, because the exchanges don't provide them access. So I think we do need to reform the healthcare the way it's delivered, and the consequences will be with patients.
But a lot of people have had the perception that the pharmaceutical industry is a very powerful industry. Couldn't you prevail upon? Is it just a layman's thinking that you couldn't prevail upon the insurance industry to cut a decent deal for patients?
The insurance business is in the business of taking more revenues than they pay out in premiums.
Mm-hmm. True. So therefore, has no incentive to.
That's their business.
That's their business. Well, moving on. Question from the audience. The American Medical Association, the American Hospital Association, and the American Association of Clinical Physicians, as well as many other healthcare groups, have expressed their opposition to the current Republican Affordable Health Care bill. Does Pfizer also oppose this bill? And if so, why? If not, why not?
We're in a democracy. Everybody can express their own opinion. Pfizer has not expressed a formal opinion. on the present bill in front of Congress, we support principles that we like to see enacted, like ability to access medicines, reasonable co-pays, fairness in the system, choice in the system. We support those elements of any plan.
What specific regulatory reforms would you like to see at the Food and Drug Administration?
Well, I'd like to see a message from society to the Food and Drug Association. They want the association, the Food and Drug Administration, to move more towards a better balance between risk and benefit. I think the FDA has been set up and has been conditioned by society and conditioned by Congress to be extremely conservative and not willing to take the appropriate risk to benefit view on the development of new drugs.
Speaking of which, what do you think of President Trump's pick to head the FDA? Like him? Don't like him?
You know, Dr. Scott. The doctor, I've met him in business situations. I think he's a respected physician. He's certainly been a regulator. He knows the FDA. I think he was there as a deputy at one point. Mm-hmm. So, you know, we look forward to working with him and the administration to ensure that our drugs get to patients as quickly as possible.
What's Pfizer doing to control the misuse and excessive prescription of its highly profitable opioids?
Well, I'm not sure I necessarily accept the premise, but we produce opioids because they're an extremely important part of the healthcare system for people who need to deal with chronic pain. We promote these products strictly on label to physicians. And we also have a product, as you know, naloxone, which can rescue you from an overdose. That we're making available at $11 for one treatment, which I believe seems a very reasonable price to save somebody's life. It's one injection. We've also given $1 million to the states and 1 million doses of naloxone to the states who are ravaged by this condition. I mean, opioid addiction is destroying families and destroying parts of our society. So we will support anything that allows the appropriate use of opioids.
So if you can make that drug available for $11, why not lower the cost of Ibrance?
Because we have to look at what the value of Ibrance delivers to the healthcare system and the cash flows that we need to continue doing research in cancer. So it's a matter of what value does the drug deliver, and we need to recover that value, because if we don't, we can't continue to invest. This is why I use the macroeconomics for you. I mean, you know, if we had a return on capital of 25%, then I think society could say, wow, that's a pretty rich return on capital. You know, our return on capital as an industry is around 11%. It's, you know, it's not that healthy. Your starting return on capital is 8 or 9% that your shareholders require. So you have to understand that our focus is what's the value of the product? Can we recover a portion of that value? And I noted to you that in statins and in cancer, we recover 20% of the value. So we're conscious of affordability. We negotiate with the health plans to ensure that they see the value in what we've provided. That's how we price.
Different question. You harped on transparency a lot and accessibility. Yet in the state of Massachusetts, your company had to be subpoenaed to have information on your donations to patient assistance groups to see if, because essentially the Massachusetts prosecutors felt that you were contributing to the inflation of costs.
Well, you know, that's their point of view. I would argue that what we do is totally within the rules of the OIG. We feel we're completely within the present regulations and laws. And so, you know, we act accordingly, but we are cooperating with his investigation.
You mentioned that the insurance system is broken. Healthcare obviously is front and center. What's one thing you want Congress to know?
Get the incentives right. You get a system to work if incentives are right. You don't get a system to work by regulations. You fine-tune a system with regulations. You ensure some equity through regulations. But if I was to wake up tomorrow and redesign the healthcare system as one person's view, most people stay in their same geographic area. They don't switch hospitals the way we switch insurance companies or providers or doctors. I think the risk and the reward should be placed on the providers in our system. They should be compensated for taking that risk. And if they're taking that risk, they're totally incentivized to look to the health of their population and not the number of treatments they give that population. That would focus them truly on health care. And they would hold the patient for most of their life, so the incentive and risk should be held there. Insurance companies could provide a service of adjudicating the level of sickness of the population, so there are appropriate transfers to those providers. That would align incentives.
There's a lot of questions, as you can imagine, about Congress and about drug prices. What concerns do you have about Congress getting into the drug pricing market as they debate this latest version of healthcare?
Well, I think that I don't believe that price controls on any part of our economic activity produce choice or opportunity or innovation. And so I would advocate against any type of price control. It's a very blunt instrument. It won't allow innovation. It won't allow the huge cures where we see, and it won't allow the diversity and choice. So I think it's a bad policy.
According to one of the trusted journalism transparency sites, opensecrets.org, your company spent $2.7 million on political donations and another $9.7 on lobbying. What did it get you?
Well, what we spend on, and I can't really confirm or deny those numbers because I don't really know if they I don't know. Well, you can stand there. I don't know where they come from, but my point of view is that we have to, as part of society, be part of the legitimate discourse with our regulators and the people who regulate us and the political class. We have to be involved. We have to advocate for choice and access and low co-pays. We have to be part of society. This expenditure is part of the political discourse, which we think we're entitled to as a company.
And what does that mean for the little guy and gal who doesn't, not walking around with that kind of money in their pocket in terms of the voice to Congress?
Well, I think that every part of society has different ways of expressing their views, and they can join associations. They can express their views individually. They can write to their congressman. They don't spend that sort of money because they're not trying to interact with the 50 states and all of the congressmen and all the senators and all of the regulators and inform and educate. So they don't need to spend that type of money.
The U.S. Veterans Administration pays some of the lowest prices for drugs, doing bulk purchasing. Should that be expanded?
It's not due to bulk purchasing. There's an agreement. There's a deal. There's a deal that was...
So you disagree with the premise of the question?
Yeah, it's not due to bulk purchasing. There's a deal that was struck a long time ago. And the United States is a prime example of nobody pays the same price for their medicines. It's a marketplace. And there was a deal struck that basically says that we, as an industry, accept that the veterans are a population in need of additional care, and we provide our products close to non-commercial prices to the veterans. And we do that on the basis of those prices don't affect the prices that we sell to Medicaid. And the prices we sell to Medicaid, which are highly discounted, don't affect the prices we sell to the private sector. This allows us to create access for the most disunfortunate members of our society while preserving a business model that allows us to continue to fund innovation.
So there's no way to sort of extrapolate that model and keep your industry solvent?
Yeah, you could. No, you could extrapolate that model, and this is what the Europeans do. They're monopsony purchasers. By the way, it's an oxymoron saying you negotiate with governments. You don't negotiate with governments. You take what they offer you if you've already got all your investments sunk. So the result of extending those preferential prices would mean substantial reduction in the total volume spent on research and the opportunities for new products. Without the U.S. market, there would not be the tremendous expansion in the innovative therapies that are available today and will be available in the future. Basically, you're seeing Europe free riding on American innovation.
And so how do you balance the scales then?
You need good trade agreements where our intellectual property is protected.
Well, speaking of trade agreements,
That's one solution.
that's one. Well, the president, of course, bailed on TPP. What's the impact?
We didn't support TPP because it was really bad for our intellectual property. It didn't give us 12 years on biologics, which we have in the US. Most of these countries, if you look at Canada, if you look at Australia, you look at New Zealand, all highly developed countries, all free riding on inventions in the United States. If you look at access for their population, I don't have the exact numbers here, but I think if you say if there were 100 products, or there were 100 new products authorized in the United States, Australia and New Zealand, their population only has access to 30% of them. The UK, they have access to 47% of them, normally 2 to 3 years later than the US. Their citizens are not getting quality healthcare.
So you're saying that's why Canada is cheaper, basically?
Canada is cheaper because it rations, and Canada is cheaper because it free rides off American innovation. Because our ability to, in our industry, let me be very clear here, we have sunk all the money up front. You're not paying for the pill. The pill is an artifact. The pill, what you're paying for is all of that clinical trials, all of that knowledge, all of that experimentation, which tells you that pill will do what it will do. The pill is irrelevant. It's just a way of getting that into your body. And so once you've done all that work, you're very subject to commercial blackmail because you need to try and recover as much money as you can from the sale of that intellectual property, and therefore you're forced by monopoly purchasing governments to say, well, I know you get $100 in the US, and that's a market-based price, but we're not going to give you access to our market at all, and you have a choice. You can either say no, in which case you get no funds to support your research, which means prices go up more in the US. Or you say, okay, what can I negotiate? Oh, and by the way, if you say no, look, I'll give you an example of Ibrance to make it very clear to all of you. Ibrance is a huge advance. It allows women with metastatic breast cancer, HER2, estrogen positive, HER2 negative, I've got to say that, although FDA will kill me. It gives them 24 months against the standard of 9 of survival. It is an incredible revolution in the treatment of this cancer. You go to the UK, and the UK government has assessed this and is offering us pennies on the dollar. Pennies. And the problem is, I can say no, which I have, and we'll walk away. But Novartis is there, Lilly's there, the next company's there. And all of them have invested the money up front, and all are incentivized to try and recuperate something from that marketplace. You cannot negotiate with governments.
But on a slightly related scale, you remember when former President Bush teamed up with former President Clinton on PEPFAR and other things, going to third world countries and to try to lower drug prices there. Can't that sort of same thinking be brought back here?
We do. That's why we give away
I mean,
1.7 million prescriptions.
But more than giving away the prescriptions, I'm talking about the pricing.
The price has to reflect the value of what you produce. If not, you don't have an economic system that makes sense. The price has to dictate where do you put your resources. Do you put it into rheumatoid arthritis? Do you put it into cancer? Do you put it into mental disease? Pricing reflects economic value, and you need that to give choice. So you can't, if you distort those market signals, you distort everything we do. And so our responsibility is to produce the best and greatest medicines we can that make the biggest impact on human life. And then to price it at a value that allows us to continue to do that work with a reasonable return to our shareholders. That's what we do. I've just shown you the indices, the return we get in the stock market is in the middle of the road. It's not at the higher end of what some industries earn. And so that So in the end, it's not, just ignore the insurers in this, it's not that. It's society's decision of how much do they want to pay for innovation. And if you don't want innovation and you don't want the next cures, then price control. If you don't want innovation, then say you have to sell all of your drug prices at the same as you give to the veterinary associate, the vets. These are not economic prices. These are prices for different segments of our population that have great need. This industry needs to have a return that allows it to continue to do its research.
But you get the perception that because of the revenues of yours and other related companies, that there's this, that was very popular during the presidential campaign and it's
Yes,
populist
it's
speech.
always populist.
But you get the whole notion that they're saying, hey, you know, you're earning umpteen $billion in revenues. You can't cut us a break. I mean, don't you get that? What do you do with that perception?
Well, that perception needs to be addressed by really good insurance. It needs to be addressed by saying, you know, that we as a society want to take care of women who have metastatic breast cancer, and we value through our market mechanisms this product, this price. If you didn't, I wouldn't be selling it at that price.
So you're basically saying it's not your problem?
No, it's, you know, if we could advance, if we could speed up the FDA, if we could get drugs to market in less than 15 years, if we had a regulatory system that encouraged innovation, we could bring lots of more drugs to market, which would lower prices. What I'm saying is we advocate for ways of making our industry more productive. The more productive we are, the lower prices will be, because there'll be more competition. There'll be more products in the market, and that's what drives pricing.
Okay, we'll get back to some, cut down on the follow-ups a little bit because we're running short on time. You said effective patient life, patent life rather, sorry, is closer to 14 years. But what are your thoughts on evergreening? Alex Manners, a discoverer of Glivec, has even said the practice is unethical.
Well, I'm not quite sure. Do you want to define what that term means, evergreening? Let's assume I'll take the common expression of it. Mm-hmm. It's where you take a molecule that is once a day and you change it so that it's now once a week. It has some value. If society wants to pay for it, they'll pay for it. If they won't, they won't. I don't, in a market-based system, I don't condemn it, I don't applaud it. It's up to society to decide, do they want a once-a-week treatment against a once-a-day treatment? Sometimes that's really important. If you're injecting yourself every day, that's an advance. If you're taking a pill once a week commits to once a day, it's pretty irrelevant, and nobody should be paid a premium for that. And society does that. In the US, in fact, you can't make money by evergreening. We don't. We have Lyrica. We have Lyrica, which is a product that's we're bringing out a once-a-day formulation, but we started the research like 12 years ago, and there was delays and delays and delays, and it's come to the market too late, and it won't protect our patent or protect our sales. I think in today's society, evergreening is a pretty failed strategy.
Earlier this year, billionaire Bill Gates offered seed money to help develop vaccines for emerging diseases that could lead to global epidemics. Such vaccine development is generally unprofitable for pharmaceutical companies. What should be done to encourage drug companies to embark on such research?
Very simple. Get the incentives right. You want an antibiotics. There is a dearth of new antibiotics. It's a product that you want people to invent and discover, but you don't want them to sell because you want to keep the antibiotics in reserve. So you need to find a way of creating an incentive to develop the antibiotic that's not related to the economic return of the antibiotic. For pandemics, Ebola, all of the diseases we could be subject to that come out of the tropical forest or come from outside of the United States. You need cures, but you can't make money from those cures. So the way to do it, I believe, is a transferable exclusivity voucher. If the FDA said to the community, if you bring up a new antibiotic with these characteristics and we approve it, we'll allow you to extend the patent on one of your existing products. Now, that's an incentive. that would fuel not only some big companies, everybody would be looking at antibiotic development because they'd be able to sell, the small companies, they'd be able to sell their development to larger companies. The whole ecosystem would be invested in finding new antibiotics because there's an incentive that's fair to society and fair to the capital that goes into funding these research projects.
We had Sylvia Matthews-Burwell here before she left her post.
Yep.
She feels healthcare is a right, not a luxury. Your view?
Well, it's a right to the extent that society is willing to fund it and pay for it. And clean water is a right to the extent that we've got sanitation and we pay for it and we value it. I mean, you know, I don't want to get too political or philosophical here, but, you know, there are very few rights in our Constitution. Intellectual property is one of them.
Before I get to the last couple of questions, a couple of calendar announcements. Upcoming luncheons include the AFL-CIO Chair Richard Trumka on April the 4th, IRS Commissioner John Costigan just in time for Tax Day on April the 5th, Joint Chiefs of Staff Chair General John Dunford will be here on April 21st, and Ballerina Misty Copeland will be here on April 17th, talking about her new book, Ballerina Body, on April 17th as a newsmaker. And before I give you the last question, we have a tradition here.
Okay.
Everybody from Nelson Mandela to Benjamin Netanyahu has received this mug.
Is it the same mug?
Not the same mug. It's yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So the final question. If you became the czar of healthcare in the U.S. and had a guarantee that all stakeholders would live up to what you would be doing behind you, what would your recommendation look like, or one recommendation?
Well, I think what I just described, I think, you know, I believe in choice and market-based solutions. I think our healthcare has been hugely distorted by a lack of incentives being in the right place. I feel that we need to go back to the physician-hospital-provider relationship with the patient. We need to provide incentives for the providers to look after their population and maintain health and not be paid for how many MRIs they can do and how many X-rays they can do and on a transactional basis. So get the incentives right. Pay the physicians to keep people healthy, and everything else will align very easily.
Thank you, Mr. Read. This concludes this National Press Club Luncheon. For more information, please go to our website, www.press.org. We are adjourned.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.